YouTube there. So let's welcome everyone to Mindful number 72. Yes, Mindful number 72. We have missed 2 weeks. 2 weeks we have missed. The cause of those missed 2 weeks was the quick reopening of school that resulted in the widespread spreading of viruses that unfortunately caught me. So I took my 2 week sick leave and I'm back here. We're talking about the school violence here as we ended speaking on the last live, and we're speaking again about the violence in schools and where it seems like this is going to end and how it's going to end. Good night, Richard Glubman. Good night to everyone over there in the live. Make sure once you're inside of the live, you hit that like button, double tap that screen. If you are over on TikTok, if you're on YouTube, hit that like as usual. And if you're over on TikTok and you're wondering what's this on YouTube, well, yes, the lives are recorded over on YouTube on my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer over there. You can feel free to run over there and subscribe to my channel, Nathan Springer, on YouTube, and catch all 71 of the other Mindful lives and see what exactly was that about. I think 2 or 3 of them have some audio problems, but most of them are there and you can catch what we usually speak about. We get into the news and current events of the day. That's what we're getting into tonight also. So we're talking school fights and school violence, and I was saying I recall a little after my school days, they murdered a young boy from the Karapichaima Senior Secondary School. Back then it changed to Karapichaima East, was it? The one with the green pants. He went to watch a football game somewhere in Marabella. By what stadium is that in Marabella? The Mani Ramjan or whichever it is. A fight happened as they were leaving, and they hit him with so many bottles, he eventually died. Now, back then, I blamed some of that on the ignorance of the administrators in schools, where they took young children and placed them into these schools that had cultures where the school had children from Form 4 and up, and these schools always were a much more physical place. If you understand what I mean. They had that aura already for years, decades. And then you took young children and just threw them in there and put them in at the bottom of this rung and expected nothing bad to happen from that. So a child died because of that. So sad, the little 2-year-old that went missing. Yeah, we spoke about that too. That's very unfortunate. And the story is so weird. I do not understand that. I pray for his safe return very soon too. But yeah, the school... I blame some of that on the school administrators, but now we're seeing this violence seem to rear its head again. And now we are all as a society, if we could have ignored it before, what it seems like it's happening now is we all as society have first row seats to all of these fights because all the children are recording all of their fights. As I said in the contemplation tonight, well, today, the contemplation I did today. As I said in the contemplation today, school uniforms and the fact that they are recording these fights means that the vast majority of these children that are engaging in these fights have obviously no care about being found out, about anybody recognizing them, about anybody seeing what happens in the long run. To me, that in itself tells something about the consequences. I think the consequences to these actions are lacking. I think human beings, I always say this, human beings work on incentives. If they have an incentive to do something, they will. If they do not, they will not, generally speaking. Incentives and consequences. And if we do not have the right incentive structure and the right consequences to back it up, this is what we are going to result in. Now, I read some articles on this. 2 preachers actually, one priest, one preacher. One of the preachers was one of our favorite judges over in the High Court there. And I'm going to go through these 2 articles, at least some of it, and see what they have to say. And I am actually in disagreement, at least partially, with the priest. Let's read and see exactly what I say I disagree about with this man of the cloth. Priest, sorry. Violent children are hurting other children. Now, that is self-explanatory. Lincoln Foxtrot, I got the message, sir. I was down for 2 weeks. I was not in any kind of business activity or anything, but I will message you. I got the message over on Twitter there. Good night, sir. Yes. Priest, violent children are hurting other children, and I think that is self-obvious. Of course, that is true. Violent children are hurting children. As the police take responsibility for dealing with school violence, and the Ministry of Education sets up a team to address the overwhelming fight seen weekly, Vicar General of the Roman Catholic Church, Father Martin Sergiu, says these juvenile aggressors are simply hurt children. Addressing the feast of La Divina Pastora, the La Divina Pastora RC Church in Superior on Sunday, Sergiu said the place for students engaged in violence was not prison. The solution is not to expel them from schooling. The solution is not to exclude them from an educational future. Prison, my dear friends, is not where these children belong. What these children need is a sense of family and admiration and love and knowing that they are intelligent. All you have to do is find the right key. If you find the right key, you unlock their minds, Sergiu said. Last month, the Ministry of Education announced the community police would be at 15 secondary schools to deal with outbreaks of student violence as it marks on a draft national school discipline matrix, etc., etc., etc. Now, this is kind of where the priest and I start to disagree. Because I think he is starting from an incorrect perspective on humanity. He went on to say, he said, a child is not born violent. A child becomes violent as a child is socially determined by violence. In psychology, hurting people hurt others. Now, I have several problems with that statement. Two problems I'll say first up. Firstly, coming from a theological perspective, I'd say that the Christian doctrine of humanity is that humanity is shaped in iniquity, that you are born in sin. So people are born in sin. That's the Christian perspective on that. So that already kind of throws out the priest's perspective to me from the Christian theological perspective. And then from the psychological perspective, from the reality of biology, the biological perspective, he is also incorrect. Because studies have been done recently where many psychologists, when they began in the 80s, they believed this, that humans are born really this kind, innocent, loving creatures, and it's the cruel society that they are developed in that makes them more evil or makes them violent, etc., etc. While that is actually not true, the tabula rasa, the blank slate belief is incorrect. Study after study now has actually shown that the most violent humans you will ever find are 2-year-old boys. I did a contemplation and actually a whole video on this quite a while ago. The most violent human being you will ever meet is a 2-year-old boy. The secret is that you have between the ages of 1 to 5 thereabouts to discipline and correctly socialize these violent young men. There is a genetic component, seemingly. There's a genetic component. You have those limited years to socialize out that kind of aggression. Otherwise, that aggression follows that young man straight through his teens, only ending statistically in his mid to late 20s. So, statistically, meeting a troubled young man that is violent at 15 and just giving him the love in his heart and finding the right key might get yourself in deep trouble, because very often that doesn't work. If you're talking about on a serious side actually fixing this problem, it's a parenting problem that starts at the age of 2. It starts before this child could have even spoken. That's when it started. That's when, if you wanted to fix it, that's when you would have had to get involved. the movies and the music, everything has an influence, yes. But as I was saying, the influence isn't necessarily more negative. The influence is an attempt to discipline this person into proper behavior. That's what society does. Society takes the crude 2-year-old. Listen, if you have a 2-year-old acting, if you have an adult acting like a 2-year-old, that's insane. You would put that person in prison within a day. Your aim as a parent and as a society is to groom these 2-year-old Neanderthals, these 2-year-old wildlings who act like crazy people constantly. They have no concept of manners, no concept of decency, a lot of these 2-year-olds. And your aim as a society is to groom them through discipline into the correct path. Otherwise, they don't need help to end up on the wrong one. That one doesn't require help. It doesn't need the help of a bad society for them to end up bad. It doesn't really work like that. They end up bad all on their own. It's like if you don't put the effort to put it good, bad is the default. Bad is the default. So that's where I disagree. It's like tending a garden. You have to know when to prune and cut back or add soil. Correct. It's the which one of those principles of thermodynamics where enthalpy, where everything degrades. Everything degrades. The effort is always required to keep it built up. Otherwise, everything degrades. That's just the nature. That's the nature of our reality. And that's what I think is missing here. The parenting from the very young age. They are hurting their friends. This is the priest going on here. They are hurting their friends. And if we are going by the newspaper reports, it seems that most of the children are from one class and from one ethnic group. And something is very wrong with that. And most of them are boys. Now, everything he said there, I think, is correct. And I agree. It seems predominantly from a specific ethnic group. It seems predominantly from a certain class group. It seems predominantly from a certain gender. And that is a problem. I agree. Now, here's the thing with that. The answer to why it's from a gender is because, right, atrophy. Thank you very much, Blue Zabuka. It's a gender because boys are more aggressive than girls. So if both boys and girls are grown up in disciplined surroundings where they are allowed to express their full extent of aggression, you would find more aggressive boys. So that's why it's boys. Why is it a specific class? I spoke about this in a previous video. The reason that you see many people talk about poverty breeds crime. I don't think so. Poverty doesn't actually breed crime. We don't actually have evidence of that. What actually shows is relative poverty does breed crime, and what poverty does cause is it limits the kind of crime you can do. I keep saying this. If you're poor, you are not going to run a very sophisticated Ponzi scheme. You cannot rent the office on the top floor to run that Ponzi scheme. Good night, supers. So poverty limits the kind of crime that you can do. So that's why you see violence from a specific class of people more, because that's the culture they grew up in. And then a specific race, a specific ethnicity. Because what you tend to see is that a specific ethnicity makes up a lot of the kind of communities that breed this. So while I disagree that it's just love they need at the age of 14 that will cure this, I do agree that it is the surroundings that helps to breed this atmosphere. Study after study has shown this. I pulled up and I was reading through some of the psychological papers on this that pretty clearly established that the effects of family and community violence on children, and you see it over and over and over. So children who grew up in communities where they witness violence from a young age, that violence witnessed from a young age has a serious deleterious effect on them as they enter the school system in many different ways. They display more aggression towards other schoolmates. They are less focused on school, etc., etc., etc. Now, the cruelty of all of this is that as this young person grows up in a violent society, they grow up in a violent community, they go into the school and they perpetrate this violence in the school that gets them kicked out of the school faster, that gets them less accomplishments in the academic area. And then because of that, they are forced to remain in the same community they were born in, and then they carry the violence that they have honed throughout their young adulthood it back right into the community to make sure that they scar the next generation of that same community with the same violence to perpetuate the cycle again. I think the solution to this is consequence. Justice Frank C. Prasad. He is one not shy from preaching. For obvious reason. The man is a preacher, apparently. Preaching judge. Mothers, don't turn blind eye to nice child's illegal behavior. High Court Judge Frank C. Prasad in a Mother's Day sermon at the Marabella Presbyterian Church called on mothers not to condone the illegal behavior of their children and to hold them to account. Now, just to add a little bit to this that I found funny was the name of the man's sermon. Where did he put the name of that sermon? In his sermon entitled Sip Water and Mind the Business. Good name, Justice Frank. But if you've been in enough lives or if you read enough news, you'd understand that Justice Frank doesn't need much added impetus to preach a sermon there. Every single ruling from Justice C. Prasad is basically a sermon. The guy exudes sermon. Sorry. Stressing that mothers are the agents of change, Justice C. Prasad said discipline is an integral aspect of positive parenting and a no-tolerance approach must be adopted. I agree nearly totally with what the justice said there. I don't like his focus on mothers alone because I think in the studies in the literature, when you look at the problems associated with childhood violence, with violence at teenage years, lacking fathers usually is a worse thing. At least when it comes to aggression. When it comes to aggression, the lack of a father in the home usually seems to have a worse result. Now, I agree with the other part of it. That isn't just on the mothers. Discipline is an integral aspect of positive parenting, and a no-tolerance approach must be adopted. That part I fully agree with. And I think that is what is seriously lacking from our school systems. If a young person, that's what I started off with, speaking about my contemplation that I did today, speaking about the fact that our country wears school uniforms. These people are fighting in their school uniform. I remember back in the days when the real bad man and them in school days, what they would do is they would go and they would take off their school shirt, tuck it inside of their bag, because if you get catch fighting in your uniform, they will know where to find you. But these children, they don't care. They are fighting in their school uniform. They are recording these things on iPhone 11, on iPhone 12 XS Max. They are recording this in HD. They are putting on the 4K and the 60 FPS. This is high quality. You could pause it and zoom in on their face and see which of them is still struggling with acne at this young age. You could see all of this. These children obviously don't care. I saw a video, a young lady in her school uniform climbed up on top of a teacher's car. And she is fighting from on top of the teacher's car, you know, dictating everything. If you're on top of the teacher's car, you know for sure at least 20 cameras are facing you. And you are in your school uniform. Your identity is very easy to find out. Nearly every single one of these school fights you see, the authorities know who all the perpetrators are. The young man who is in the hospital, who was hospitalized from being severely beaten in school, all of the perpetrators in that act are known. It is not difficult to find them. It is easy. You find their uniform, you find their gender, you go to the school, you see their age, you point them out. It's not a difficult thing. Do you think the current culture of Trinidad and Fulidance mentality are contributing factors to school violence? Yes and no. I think it's both a symptom and a cause. It's more of a symptom than a cause. It's part of the cycle. it's a symptom that helps to feed into the other causes. The reason that children could sing "I fully dance" is because they have parents who are not disciplining them. I could not, at the age of 12 or 13, walk into my mother and father's home and sing out loud that I am fully dance. I could not have done that. It just was not something within the realm of possibility for someone like me. That has to do with parenting, and I think the lack of discipline coming from the parents is the crux of this matter. These parents are not disciplining their little 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and then these 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds are let loose in the school system, and they expect a school system that was created. The nature of the school system, even through colonial times, even the bad of the colonies and the colonists, etc., the expectation was that parents discipline their children and then send them into the school as disciplined children to then be further enhanced by the school system. When you send your child in school, they are already supposed to be able to line up and listen when the teacher says sit and when the teacher says stand. The teacher isn't supposed to be teaching them discipline. The most important word a young child come here and learn the understanding of is the word no. Exactly. It's the parents. Here's my kind of radical sounding solution to a lot of this. It sounds radical, but this is actually what I believe. I believe we have to get serious about holding people responsible. If your child beats, destroys property, does anything, you are responsible for that action. Who else will be responsible? Listen, I don't think the state owns the children. People ask who owns a child, and many people with the human rights, etc. And I agree with human rights. I agree with human rights. But I believe parents own their children. I'll say it like that. I mean, I could think of a better technical way to put it, but I would put it that raw and that simple. A parent is the owner of their child. If me and my wife go away to the bushes of anywhere, we don't need a state, we don't need a government, we don't need a police service, we don't need a child protective service, we don't need a fire station, we need nothing. We just need ourselves and our parts, and we can make children all on our own. We are the only ones responsible there, us and God. And in that case, I would put the parents as the sole owners of children. If you are the owner of this human being, this little child that you have here, and you send them into an institute, and what you own damages what I own, it is your responsibility to face the consequences for it. If your child beats my child in school, I want to sue you. And here's the next part of it. I think the school should be held responsible for any fights held on their compound. If a fight happens on a school compound, the school is responsible to pay and responsible legally for any action there. It has to stop being that no one is responsible for this. All of these things are happening and no one is responsible. The government is responsible. That's all who? The government and the society. These nebulous terms that you can't point anyone to. There needs to be a name that you can point to. The name that you point to is the school. If this occurred on your school compound, it's within your school institution's responsibility to ensure the fight doesn't happen. No, it's the parents, Curvon says. I agree and I disagree at the same time. Here's the dynamic I'm putting into that. If you take someone else's property and bring it onto your property, and then damage occurs while it is on your property, it's also your responsibility. So it's now on the school to make sure they contact the parent to make sure the parent is held responsible also. And here's the thing. If they say that some parents are not capable of being held responsible for their children, well then you as the school are your responsibility is to make sure that me, if I am a parent who is able to hold anything my child does as my responsibility, I signed away to that. Anything my child does is my responsibility. Good. You cannot then take another parent to send their property inside of this school where I am responsible for my child and bring another child whose parent is not responsible for them. Then that's irresponsible on your part as the school. You are not creating a safe environment for my child. I am sorry. I am sorry. I know that the reality is some of these parents are not capable, and that's not the school's fault. But it is your fault if you allow this student that you know is under the control of incapable parents to end up in an institute where they could damage my child. And if you allowed that, you are then responsible for it. I think the responsibility needs to start to land directly on the schools, directly on the parents. I mean, legally, criminally, financially responsible for all of these actions. There is no way, I cannot understand this. How identifiable people can be seen damaging someone to the point of hospitalization, and no adult is held responsible for this. That is insane. It is insane. I may agree with the priest that maybe the right place for indisciplined young people may not be prison. Okay, fine. But the right place for them is not at the side of disciplined young people. You do not take someone's nice, well-disciplined, they spent time, effort, and resources growing up their child, and then put them right next to someone who didn't do the same, and both get into an altercation and someone damages that one. That does not make sense. It just doesn't. It could sound elitist, but I don't think it is elitist. I think it's simple sense. It's simple logic. It's something to make societies functional. Charge a parent and see how quick it turns political. Yeah, I know, but that's why you need to do it. Find out where the politicians stand on all of this. What resources do the schools have to de-escalate or prevent these fights? I don't know. I don't care. If you are not able to stop my child from being damaged inside of your premises, then you are not supposed to have them there. It's that simple. You have to figure out how to make sure, however you do it, make sure my child doesn't end up beaten up on your premises. Otherwise, you have to face the consequences. It's like asking the question, what resources do I have to not get in an accident when I'm driving my car? Well, I don't know. Make sure your car is up to mark, that you have the resources not to hit mine. If your car hits my car, you must pay or go to jail. All right, folks. That's actually all I have for now. I have a lot more, but I have to work my way slowly back in. My voice is already kind of going. I don't know if you could hear it. Tutor will kick brass. I don't care. And that's why personally, I might be a little more radical than this, but I don't understand from some of these parents' perspective. Personally, I will take my child out of these schools and figure out some private system to educate my child. Because if you are putting your child in an institute where they obviously cannot assure the safety of your child, what are you doing? I cannot listen. When I hear these stories, I pray about my children to come. I just pray because I just cannot understand this. I don't want to say anything incriminating, but I cannot. How are you telling me my child, and I look at how much effort some people put into their children, the amount of effort some people put into their children and to making sure their children get exactly what they have. How could I spend that much effort into my child, send them off to school, expecting them to learn, and then I hear my child is unconscious in a hospital bed? Boom! I just cannot understand that. I agree with the principle, but literally in practice, how do they stop the children from malfunction? That's what I said before. The practice, in practice, how you stop that is any child whose parent cannot handle them cannot be allowed on the school premises. any child whose parents cannot handle them, then maybe that's for the military schools. Maybe that's where the military schools need to come back in, where they have military personnel handling these schools. If the parent cannot handle the child, then the child cannot go to the school. And if the parent can handle the child, that is how you fix the fighting problem. I remember back in my days, the threat of calling in people's parents was enough to get a lot done. Because in my days, many of the students that were going the school I was going, their parents paid attention to school. If their parents got a call and the principal called your parent, I don't know about many of these young people, but if the principal called my mommy, I was in a lot of trouble. What do you mean the principal called mommy in the middle of the day? How does that happen? How does that happen? We need to go back to these days where children knew, if my parents get involved in this, I'll be in trouble. I don't want this to happen. The parents had control over their children. Any child whose parents do not have them under control cannot enter the school system. It is that simple. Remember, they spend most of their lives there. They come home to sleep. That is not true. They spend most of their formative years with the parent before the age of 5. Most children have already settled their aggressive states by the age of 5. If you look at the boy who is fighting right now in Form 3, look back at him in first year, and he was jump kicking people. 90% of the time he was jump kicking somebody's child back in first year too. You could have told this from the first year. So if from the beginning, any parent who cannot control their child must find another place for the child, that already answers that problem. That's the way I see it. Corporal punishment shouldn't have been taken out of school. That was a dumb idea. I'm not sure about that. You see, my principle, why deny them education though? You weren't fully following me, Michael Ange. I said send them to schools where there are military personnel to see after them. That's what you do. They aren't denied education. They are denied having free reign to damage other people's children. That's what they are denied. When a parent could tell a child, when you do your thing, I just don't get caught. Huh. Yeah, but my solution, that as I said, it doesn't even need the corporal punishment back in schools. It doesn't need corporal punishment back in schools. Parents who can handle their children, maybe they could do the corporal punishment if they want, but if the parent can handle the child, all the school needs to do is threaten, hey, I'm going to call in your parent if you don't behave, and that's that. That to me, that was the main way, that our school manipulated all children into behaving. We will call in your parents. We will call in your... That's all they had to say. And most children back in line instantly because their parents had control over them. It's that simple. If the parent does not have that control, then it's not a matter of being cruel to these children and you don't want them to get an education and etc. etc. I think some of this kind of over bleeding heart nonsense causes blood to spill innocently otherwise. Bleed your heart for them in a sensible way. These children obviously cannot function in these more free school environments. These children whose parents don't have control over them need to be in a more militant place, obviously, because it's not working out as it is right now. Put them in Milat. Put them in military school, wherever. And I wouldn't doubt that many of these people, by the time they cross their 20s and a lot of this aggression cloud raises from their minds, they may be very grateful for people who were able to see where they were heading and put them into a more stringent program. Half don't even want the education anyways. And that's a truth. They need to open back the youth camps. Yes, they should have never closed the youth camps. Listen, something that annoys me so greatly in modern times now is the way how sometimes some of the people that say like they care so much actually are counterproductive. Close down the youth camps because you don't want to stigmatize anyone with putting them there. Close down the junior sex because everyone must pass for level amongst them. We all go to secondary schools. Make sure that everyone passes common entrance. Everyone gets a place. I remember Miss Pasadbi says everyone gets a place in school, and it's so that is ridiculous. That's just not how reality works. That's not how reality works. You cannot take people and force them to work just as everyone else works, because some people's parents were different, some people's genetics are different. Reality just works like that. Some people don't function the same as others, and nothing is wrong with that. What you need is to have so many avenues that regardless of how you function, you can function functionally in the society. But no, throughout the junior sex, throughout the youth camps, throughout all of those technical and vocational studies, and make sure everyone gets a place in a secondary school to go there for 7 years and see how great that turns out. Yeah, sure. They don't even have respect their parents, and there should be consequences for not showing up when a school calls. Call parents back then meant blows in front of friends. Very likely. That's, and listen, many people like to talk about the abuse part of it, and there may be some abuse in that, but I would rather a little more on that side than a little more on this side, where we have people sending their children into war zones. There's no way in a peaceful country you are supposed to send your child to get an education and have any kind of probability that they end up in the hospital badly beaten. That's not boy days. That's not boys will be boys. Listen, I remember fights that are boys will be boys fights and just boy days fights. Excuse the sexism, please. Fights like that are the kind of fights that don't end up by the principal. Those are the kind of fights you fight with your friend, you and them remain friends after. The teacher never found out, the guard never found out, the principal never found out. That's the kind of fights like boys will be boys. Not what we are seeing on these videos with groups of people jumping on each other out in the main road and this nonsense. That's insane. And it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. People will die if it continues. That's why I always say our education had failed and your whiplash. I wouldn't say our education system has failed. At this point, school should be for the smart or rich. Well, privatizing schools kind of solves some of that problem. Miss Roney. All right. My voice feeling like it's about where it going. My voice reach where it going. So, thank you all for being here. It was nice after 2 weeks sick leave. After 2 weeks sick leave. And I'll see you all again tomorrow. I'll be here again tomorrow. So, we will chat again tomorrow. You know, I want to wait, and I don't know if Rhea is here right now, Rhea, but I want to have, and this is going to be controversial, I know, but I think it would be beneficial. I want to have a discussion on abortion, and I want to do it with someone there. One of the problems I have with the abortion discussions are the amount of dishonesty all around the arguments. There's a lot of dishonesty, and I'd like to at least be honest with where we discuss it. I agree it has not feel, but it is feeling and falling. Yeah, that's true. But Rhea tagged me in something over here on TikTok that started some of that discussion, and I wouldn't mind continuing it. So if you all see Rhea around, tell her looking for a discussion for one, not right now, you know, when my voice catch back itself a little better, then maybe sometime, probably Tuesday or Friday or something this week. But yeah, we could look forward to that. Be sure to head over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Spring on YouTube, if you want to find out and see what we discuss in the other lives. And make sure you're up to mark with every night's live. And if you want to look back at anything we spoke about tonight, you could go back on the YouTube live and you'd see it there again. So yeah. Yes, Ronnie, I'm waiting. Wait on. What am I waiting on? I'm waiting. I'm here still waiting. Let me explain what. Oh, your statement about the smart and the rich. Not tonight, Gil. We'd have to continue. I'm shutting down. We'll continue. I'm good for it. So I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you again tomorrow night for the next Mindful Live. Peace.